Hello everyone, this is Dmitry from Magazine Publish. Today we're in an unusual place. We've come to visit Mikhail Kuvshinov at his family estate, which is still being set up. But nevertheless, we can already film our video show here. And we came together with Sergei Belokurov. Hello, Sergei.
Yeah, hi.
And actually, here is Mikhail Kuvshinov, who may not be in the center, but is still one of the most important figures in our meeting today.
Well, estate is a bit of an exaggeration. Small house.
If there's a place, then it's an estate. Let's just go with that. We came to discuss a few topics, well, at least one that everyone is concerned about. So, what's happening now with Landa Digital printing? And for context, it's important to understand that this is the famous Israeli company founded by Benzion Landa. Now, we've learned what his real name is, or Benny Landa. And this company invented and promoted a new digital printing technology, which they call nanography. It's printing through an intermediate carrier belt where the inkjet printing is done onto the belt first and then onto the substrate. And they've been developing it for, I don't know, about 10 years, right? It's already been 13 years. Since the 12th year, it was voiced. And now it's in a difficult situation, on the verge of bankruptcy. So what actually happened with Landa? What awaits us next? And how does this concern all of us? That's what we've gathered to discuss. And now the traditional question. Yes. What do you think about, in general, how did Landa become what it is today? And what brought it to this point where we are now? Yes. Let's probably start with Mikhail, right? Because he's our EX prominent expert in digital printing.
Nanogrash.
Yes. It's so tiny you can't even see it.
Nano expert?
Despite yes, well, he really knows his stuff. So, Mikhail, what's the real story there?
Well, actually, I can say that I not only expected this, but I even predicted what happened in writing.
You mean a year ago?
Well, not just a year ago. But unlike most authors, I had quite a skeptical attitude toward what was happening. In the early years, I was skeptical about the promises that in a year or three there would be a garden city here. I wrote that it doesn't work like that. Even if we take recalling the off-season 10 pregnant women, there still won't be a baby in a year.
In 9 months, right?
Yes.
In a month, there will be one.
In a month, 10 days of a pregnant woman, and in a month, she won't have a baby.
I haven't watched that movie in a long time. I should rewatch it. That's it. So basically, after it turned out that this is indeed the case, and after 12 years there were about 60 cars sold at the drop, it became clear that this didn't happen in 3 years. But the second part, specifically at the last drop in 2024, it became clear that all of this isn't about magic, it's about money. That the investments were around $1 billion, sales were about, well, at the time they said 60, but now it turns out it was only 51, so several dozen. And the price of the car was, well, 3.5 to 4 million. So if you combine these three numbers with 12 years, it's clear that this isn't about money.
Yeah, talk about love.
Well, it's more about love for the party of the government.
Is this some kind of ideological thing or what?
Capitalist.
Well, that's already ideology.
Well, actually, it's really about a deep love for money. Because they somehow managed to attract that kind of money, which honestly is worth a whole lot, truly.
We're talking about $1.3 billion, I think.
So in total, the investments amount to $1.3 billion, and the debts are somewhere around $500 million in direct loans. Benny spent quite a lot of his own money. I have to say, in many ways, he's a person. How should I put it? If a Russian or an American had this kind of attitude toward their country, we would call him a true patriot. He invests in university education in his own country. He actually created a foundation together with his wife, which supports smart people and so on.
If we're talking about Israel.
About Israel, of course. In Israel, such a person is called a Zionist.
Ah.
So it already sounds kind of cool. In honor of Mount Zion, there is a mountain, actually. I've been there.
Is there nowhere to...
Well, it's a mountain, how do I put it? Well, there was this joke. He says, Isaac, what do you think? Is Israel a big country or a small one? You know, I'm absolutely sure that Israel is a big country, because otherwise it would be called Izia.
Currently, yes.
Exactly. So he's a brilliant person, and in fact, he invested part of that money directly into the Israeli economy. For example, since I heard this firsthand, that one of the most important conditions he set when selling Indigo to Hewlett Packard was that both the production, the machines, and the manufacturing of consumables would remain on Israeli soil.
Yes. Yes. Apparently, they managed to reach an agreement. So he's truly a smart person, a real patriotin oligarch of the kind who invests in his homeland. Although, of course, he wasn't born in Israel, but let's put it that way. Uh-huh. Historical homeland. Citizens of their own country.
While at the same time, what's being done here is related to printing, and as we can see, 51 machines in 12 years.
They must be somewhere. Yes, maybe they're even working. There are a lot installed in America. Listen, but as always, installed and operating are not the same thing. Here.
I'm absolutely sure they're working, because if they weren't, from a marketing perspective, they would have just been returned. This is because in the West, machines like these aren't bought with cash out of pocket. They're bought through leasing or financing. If something isn't working for you, why would you keep paying every month? You just...
I don't know. I know print shops where they buy equipment, set it up, and then it just sits in the corner gathering dust. Well, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. Strange, that's all.
But, you know, none of those print shops are actually on the markets where Benny's sales are active.
Well, maybe, yeah.
Do you know how many such print shops there are in Israel and America? No?
I mean, that's one thing, and this is something else. That's the classic case, right? Everything's different there.
That's where money doesn't cost, 25% a year, where you can get credit, but you still have to keep track of it.
So when the business margin is minimal, you have to think things through.
I'm absolutely sure that all these machines, well, maybe with a rare exception that proves the rule, are working.
Let's consider this a successful machine.
I even looked into some of the machines in Europe, the ones I could get information about. After all, with 4 degrees of separation, we know absolutely everyone. And here, it turns out you can reach someone in just 2 handshakes. No, they work fine.
Of course, if people are satisfied. You would take a look at where things are actually good.
About people being satisfied? Well, people say they're satisfied.
No one is going to say they're dissatisfied after buying a car.
For 3.5 to 4 million?
Yes, or Mikhail has been watching Benya for a long time and at some point even predicted his downfall.
Well, not a downfall. For him, I still hope and wish all the very best. But this whole idea of the demographic stamp, unfortunately, I'll explain why later, didn't take off.
I see. Sergey recently started looking into the issue and brought it up in a trending LinkedIn post, which, I don't know, was seen by hundreds of thousands of people.
200,030 people in total altogether.
So 230 people watched it, those who are interested, and we realized that this is most likely the world outside the Russian-speaking community, and there, it's truly a hot topic, and probably more information will come from there. Sergey, what's going on there?
Well, if we're just talking about the current situation with Benny Landa, of course I looked into it. Mikhail has often commented on this topic. Mikhail. There is a Mikhail in almost every country in the world who followed him very closely and shared his own opinions. And to be honest, for some reason, all the experts out there were saying the same thing. That is, it's not a commercially successful project, too much money, unclear production costs. In words, it all sounds very impressive, but in reality, there's nothing to it in this regard. And the biggest problem as such is that for some reason, he greatly limited the capabilities of his machine because he only made bone format machine as not B2, not B3, nothing like that. Just bone format only.
Where's the problem?
Well, basically, you end up immediately narrowing your own potential quite drastically. And naturally, everyone had the question, is there some kind of arrangement with HP Indigo? Because HP Indigo doesn't have anything in bone format. And it turns out, is covering the niche where Indigo simply doesn't offer anything. And naturally, everyone assumed that, well, probably HP was actually preparing to buy them. Everyone expected this, but something went wrong. The first warning signs appeared, it seems, about a month ago. People in the market started talking about Landa having major problems. More than 3 weeks ago, he announced that he was downsizing, reorganizing and laying off 100 out of the 500 employees currently working for him worldwide. At the moment, we have certain court records indicating that about 229 people remain out of the original 500. If you go on LinkedIn, I personally know many people who used to work at Landa, can see that they are looking for jobs, and some of them are posting that they've retired. So in other words, there are people who are already of retirement age, and instead of looking for a new job, they just say, well, that's it. After Landa, I'm retiring. In this regard, there are farewell posts, latest news. Yes. People are making such posts and so on. And after this kind of hype was created, a lot of people became active on LinkedIn and also started commenting on this topic. Although, in my opinion, it's quite late because the hype is already dying down. Why? Because there was an expectation even in court. Landa's lawyer said the following: give us 2 weeks. We practically already have the contract signed. Everything is ready with the new investor, the buyer. Just literally so that, well, let's take 2 weeks just to be safe. Just give us that right now so that the creditors don't bother us. We'll finalize the deal and that's it. Well, 10 days have already passed. On Thursday, there will be the next court hearing at which the administrators will be appointed. So their main request is this: not to appoint a bankruptcy administrator, but rather someone who would oversee the restructuring of the company at bankruptcy, but restructuring so that they can pay off their debts. Because right now, the existing assets amount to about $150 million, which are owned by the Landa company, while the losses are 1 to 1.3 billion.
Let me clarify. Assets not counting the intangible ones. Without patents, yes, that's absolutely correct. That's absolutely right. And it just turns out to be a situation where
It still won't be enough if you try to cover the debts.
Well, as they say, for a hungry cat, even a tuft of fur is something, right? Actually, the backstory here is really huge. And if I were to try to describe it all in a video, it would probably take several hours because a lot of people have published information about it. And I, of course, have shared some of it myself, just to convey what exactly that there are, well, about 60% of the funds invested in the company. And very often those people didn't take a share. They just gave it as an investment, which would later be returned to them with a premium. These are the owners of Tetra Pak and the BMW lady who literally 10 years ago said the following: I am investing in the future of printing in general, in printing technology and the printing industry. Well, 10 years have passed.
The future has arrived.
The materials from the next court case indicate the following: the company is unprofitable. Not a single year of its existence has it made a profit. In recent months, the net losses amounted to $12 million per month. Just pure losses, of course, generated for the first time. Naturally, now that they've laid off so many people, these losses will obviously decrease. But of course, the main question is who will actually do the work then? If out of 500 employees, only 229 remain, who is going to rebuild everything from scratch? That's why there are some very big questions about this. And according to court documents, the company Landa Digital reported that by their rough estimates, just to break even, that is, to recoup the investments already made, they will need 5 years, meaning until 2030, and an additional 300 million in investments. A huge number of people in the Commons Printing House directors, suppliers, and so on, they said things like, we immediately realized that Benny Landa was a fraudster. In various ways, they said these were swindlers. It was obvious from the start that this was a scam. Like from the very first day, we saw all of this. And naturally, this topic kept developing. But I'll say this, literally 5 days after the first publications, a huge number of advocates showed up. Well, in the online space, on social networks, an advocate is considered to be someone who defends the opponent. A defender, they're called advocates. I don't know why that's become the norm. Defenders of Landa.
Well, in English, there are two different words: lawyers and barristers.
And who showed up? Barristers?
Here in Russia, we call them advocates. Still, I'm in favor of...
Since the case took place in the English-speaking world, I think it was the lawyers who showed up.
Yes.
Legal professionals, broadly.
Yes, exactly. And what happened was that people came forward saying, no, Benny Landa changed the printing technology from indigo. Benny Landa invented a unique technology that will change and completely revolutionize the entire market. And offset printing will disappear from sight, so to speak, and so on. And there were actually a lot of such, comments, separate posts and so on. I watched almost all of them, read the comments people were writing and looked into who these people were. They're all Jews. But what I mean is, I don't know if they're citizens of Israel or not, but they're Jews because this person, of course, worked with Benny in Israel. He has a Jewish last name, roughly speaking. And now he works in America.
Doubts about sort of.
Well, it's normal when, roughly speaking, they're all driven by the same energy. They're all completely behind him in this regard. But absolutely none of these people are Landa's employees. That is...
Branches? Representatives?
No. There are 229 employees left working. There were about 350, roughly speaking, even more, of course. But there have been layoffs. People were fired and so on. They don't defend him openly. None of them do. In private correspondence, they might say certain things. And his former colleagues from Indigo, meaning those who worked with him back at Indigo, and HP Indigo people who are still closely connected with him, as I understand it, either supported him or something like that. And the people who once worked at Landa and have now moved on to their own projects or other companies, they all defend him. I started wondering, how is that possible? Why? Mikhail said something right. Yes, it's true, Benny is a patriot of his country. Why? Because there is unconfirmed information. This is what Israeli, naturally Jewish, of course, guys who work in the printing industry in Israel, right? They say that everything HP Indigo does in Israel and exports contributes 1.06% to the country's GDP. So just HP Indigo alone, which is still located in Israel, has its production of consumables and equipment there. There, as it's calculated, the company's export revenue is multiplied by 3 to estimate the total contribution to the economy, and it's assessed at 1.06%. In 2012, Benny Landa said that his goal was for Landa Digital Printing to contribute 2% of Israel's GDP. So, not measured in billions, but specifically 2%.
He wants to earn that for the country.
I haven't even checked how much Gazprom accounts for in our country. Well, probably significantly more.
The scale, yes.
Yes, in that regard. So I can tell you this, the current topic is such that there are defenders, they come and they speak up, but a lot of people say the following: okay, if this is such a successful technology, why are there so few sales? If everything is so great, why is there no feedback from the clients who bought these machines? No feedback at all, no articles.
Well, that's exactly what I was asking about, right? I mean, does the machine actually work? Are they satisfied with it? Well, they say yes. But as for how much they say, well, definitely not in the public space.
Well, there's this thing, sorry, hold on a second, which hasn't been documented anywhere, that every client who bought Landa Digital machines signed a non-disclosure agreement, according to which nothing that happens
Not allowed to talk about.
with the machine, they can talk.
Well, during the equipment testing stage, you might be able to bring something up, but after that, it actually works in your favor. I mean, the more people say how good you are and that you're truly independent, you bought the machine and say, listen, it's great for me, I'll get another one, right? And then your neighbor thinks, there must be something to this, but they're staying silent. So this kind of marketing isn't happening. Does that mean things aren't as rosy as they seem? I really don't know. We're all just shrugging our shoulders here, talking, making guesses. Misha, I actually wanted to ask something else. He'll think about it now and answer both this and other questions for us. And about this collusion that Serioza mentioned, is it possible? About how supposedly HP and Indigo split everything up to B2 and everything above that goes to Landa. Is that even possible, or is it pointless?
Well, actually, strangely enough, I did have some inside information, though. It's outdated, but at first I got interested in the Gazprom story, and just now I asked the artificial idiot about it. He said that Gazprom accounts for 5 to 7% of the Russian economy.
Whoa, that is at an even distance.
In other words, that's really serious.
Percent's huge.
Getting back to the deal, first of all, I know for certain that during Barshani's time at the company, Indigo most definitely saw Landa Digital Print, which had constructed its facility wall-to-wall with Indigo as a direct and significant competitor in the marketplace.
Well, so that I could keep up with him.
Exactly, so that people would see them as a very dangerous, formidable, and fierce competitor to others.
Ah, I see.
So any kind of agreement, like, a friendly arrangement on a personal level back then, I think was simply unthinkable. But the Barshani era ended, and the gentleman, what's his name? I've never seen him in my life. Hahu came in. I don't remember his last name, so I won't mispronounce it. No one remembers, right? That American guy, well, he's Israeli, but he built his entire career in America. I don't rule out that he might have reached some kind of agreement. I even don't rule out that in the remaining 4 years, 4 days, we might see them sign something. I don't believe it, but I can't rule out that possibility.
Well, hypothetically.
So in principle, it would be possible. But there's another point. As the great Al Capone said, you can get much further with a kind word and a gun than with a kind word alone. In this sense, well, in my article, I mentioned not only economic power, but also legal power. So when Benny Lando was signing those papers about selling indigo for just under $1 billion, well, in today's money, and there was a lot written in those documents. I know for a fact that a lot of lawyers worked on them. And to be sure that there isn't a single loophole there that couldn't at least be used to try to accuse someone of direct competition. I think that from Hewlett-Packard's perspective, it would have been foolish not to do that. And he, in general, wasn't planning to at that time, so he probably didn't put up much resistance. I think that those documents contain something that could, at least maybe, not necessarily prevent, but could hinder direct competition like that.
Got it. Let me rephrase the question. Tell me, if they hadn't made the B2 and B3, would that have been beneficial? What do you think?
I think they would have sold more.
Well, dramatically more?
I don't think they would have sold dramatically more B2 format machines.
You mean indigo?
Well, because besides if we're talking about indigo, then maybe fewer indigos would have been sold. But they're also, the Japanese machines, Fuji, Screen,
True.
Konica, and others are making them too. Where are all those sales?
No one sees them.
There aren't any?
They don't exist.
Where are all the young guns?
Well, hold on.
But we're not talking about digital machines. We're talking about those young guns who are supposed to wipe offset printing off the face of the earth. That's where the root of all this lies. He promised not a digital machine that would be 10% cheaper or 20. He promised a digital machine that, and I quote, would handle print runs up to 8,000 sheets. If he had made a machine that could handle print runs up to 8,000 sheets, it would work perfectly well in bone format. In that case, he would have been right to focus on the main production format, whether it's B2 or not B2. How much real B2 is there anyway? I don't even think it's 30%. Printing B2 and even more for packaging, bone and even more for packaging. Maybe something would be interesting if he made a second version of the machine, a roll-fed one, like he promised, about 1 meter wide. There might be a second card there. I think he is absolutely right. But this market is already covered by many digital press offerings. And not just from Hewlett-Packard. It would be interesting if they could at least have the cost per print there, or ideally reach the price point that can actually compete with offset printing. But that hasn't been done. And if it had been done, then bone would be much more convenient than B2. Why spread yourself thin?
Well, it's logical to assume that, but there haven't been any huge B2 sales, so...
Why isn't Hewlett-Packard moving forward? That's what I'm talking about. I even discussed it with Barshani himself. Moreover, as a result of all these discussions, not just with me, of course, but among others in Brazil, they even held a sort of auction about this. All the dealers, so to speak, had votes on what to invest in next.
Like we have the option to pick an envelope.
Yes, so you have, let's say, 100 votes. This B2, for example, costs 60. So from our table, we put in 60. That means there was only a little left for minor things, back when there was no B2 machine yet. He himself was unsure whether it was worth going into B2. But he did all of this after talking with us. And why isn't there a B1? Actually, they do have a B1 machine. It was called the 90. But it's a roll-fed machine, so you have to cut at the output.
It's the same thing, yes. Well, 100 times, yes, with certain conditions.
It is capable of doing all that. Even on those, on the 20,000 machine, there are 2 installations in Europe that work with light cardboard. So basically, all of this exists, but they think, excuse me, for that kind of money, per square centimeter, especially when you remember how much an offset plate costs, which, by the way, has become twice as cheap now that they're made in China, and how much time is spent, which is even more important, on reconfiguring the offset machine. These options have just become not as attractive.
So, does that mean there's no place for Landa on the market?
For the machine he made, there is no place. And that's not my expert opinion. That's a medical fact.
That's the consensus opinion.
It's a medical fact confirmed by the market, yes. And for this machine, there's no place. But my expert opinion is, why is there no place for it? Because what was promised was a machine capable of handling print runs up to 8,000 inclusive. And another digital machine has been made.
One of many. So, it was no breakthrough. This is what was promised, right? A revolution that would turn...
There was a breakthrough, but not in the way people say. In the Soviet Union, two things were launched: Sputnik and agriculture.
Scaling new heights, right? Incredible heights were reached when it came to attracting investors' money.
The breakthrough accordingly was made, but something broke along the way. The sound is off. And as for him being a fraud, a swindler, well, I could go on about that for a long time, but that's another topic. I believe that he invested much more of his own money and lost it on this project enough, in fact, to be absolutely certain that he truly believed in this idea. But as for him being a swindler, he really did create a kind of world that made people believe. But was he mistaken then?
The future, yes, he painted a future that never came.
Yes, he created a version of the future that he couldn't bring to life.
Well, what can you do? What else, Serioja?
Well, if we're talking about Landy in this context, well, of course, people look at the past. Everyone has become wise in hindsight. They look back and say, he didn't do this right here. I think the big problem is that when he left in 2012, the market situation was completely different. With the machines that were available at the time, back then, we really didn't have HP Indigo machines of those formats and speeds yet, probably. Digital machines were really in their very infancy at that time, roughly speaking, both in terms of resolution, quality, and everything else. Naturally, when he talked about that, well, like, here I am telling you about the future that will be, yes, there, Nuvasuki. Like, let me tell you what Nuvasuki will be like. Naturally, after that, there were claims that after 2012, his group had multi-billion orders. Now we see the companies at 1.3 billion in losses. Total investments are 500 million, and the loss as such is what it is. And many people are analyzing what exactly caused this. Well, in reality, there really haven't been any technological breakthroughs. Unfortunately, what you can print, like, I found a photo published by an engineer who printed... There's a photo, by the way, if anything, I'll insert it into this video right now. He's standing there, Benny is hugging him, they're both very happy, and so on. But a year later, he left the company, this engineer, the one who printed that fingerprint. And very often, it happens that you can print something small, something simple, and it might even turn out really well for you. But then scaling all of that up to production is a big, big challenge in itself. And many technologies that exist because the so-called killer of inkjet printing technologies based on piezo crystals was being developed back in 2008. Everyone was saying any viscosity, any droplet, the ink will cost $2. That's it, the end of everything. But these companies closed down within a year. Sometimes it happens that there are technologies that are commercially unfeasible, technically impossible to implement, and do not achieve commercial success. Many people say the following: well, if this is such an amazing technology, why are there so few sales? Yes, you could say that sales were constantly being postponed. The very first beta sales were in 2016, then in 2018, and more widespread sales started in 2022. It's possible that the numbers mentioned initially, even before the court publication, that it was installed on 70 machines, maybe some of those were returns. Why? Because Salt 51. How come? Why 70 and not 51? Maybe there were returns that weren't made public in this regard. They got it, realized what it was, said, take it back, and that was that. They didn't like it. Unfortunately, many things in this technology are not transparent. Inkjet technologies aren't standing still either. Ink isn't standing still either, because let's start with the fact that this year, the company KOC announced, here you go, 1200 DPI. And that's it. Everything turned upside down.
Here it's very... May I ask?
Of course. I wanted to ask a question.
First of all, regarding the fact that the technology to print a single copy and to print continuously, those are different things. That's really true, but Lambda, nevertheless, has reached a point where, roughly speaking, the machine doesn't print perfectly, but it produces a result you can sell. I have prints lying around at home that are about 4 years old, and honestly, I examined them pretty closely. There wasn't really anything in them, so to speak, that would make you want to write an article saying how terrible they are.
There's really nothing to criticize, basically.
Well, you could find something to nitpick, but it would just be nitpicking. It's not...
It wouldn't be objective, right?
As we know, you can find fault even with a plywood pole.
No problem.
But objectively speaking, it was printing well enough, and has been for quite a while. It seems to me that the real issue there is money and time, which are, of course, closely connected. So, for example, last year I put together a chart, so to speak, showing how much Indigo earns from the moment they unveiled their first machine, and how much Lambda earns. These are two separate things. At the point when Indigo was sold to Hewlett-Packard, when that whole story ended, they had already reached profitability. And they were already generating a fairly significant turnover. I mean, it wasn't like Hewlett-Packard just came in and threw money at them. Here you go. Here's your $800 million. First, they invested in a 10% stake Tito. Get in and take a look at everything from the inside. After that, they bought out the rest, but the payment consisted of a lump sum and an option. If certain results were achieved within a specified period, then in fact you would get more. And those results were achieved. Landa Digital Print is now lagging far behind that graph. And it had already fallen behind back then. If they had actually built the machine 3 years after he had already announced promise to make it in 3 years, then it would have been good. I don't know what the problem was. Whether it was that they had too good of a marketing pitch for investments or that their development work was just too poor. Judging by the fact that he started building a factory in Israel at that time, he was counting on all of this happening. But yes, he really didn't deliver the machine on time, but he did do something. But it was more expensive and much later. And, excuse me, that's like an expensive egg for Easter only. Good if it's on time.
Okay, that's how it is for lunch. Yes. Well, I'll put it this way. Even if we talk about Lambda, many people still point out that, okay, even if we take sales and multiply them by 3 or 4 compared to the investments and losses involved, it's basically nothing. And there are serious doubts as to whether this machine was even sold at a profit. Because judging by the technologies that were used there, since it was all essentially custom-made production, and he was still doing it...
It was probably definitely sold at a loss. But that's more than normal.
Well, like, let them make some money on the excavation, so to speak.
Any car, any product can be sold when you have scale with the right approach. If you sell 1,000 of these switches, then each one will be worth its weight in gold. If you sell 10 million switches, you can sell them for 2 cents each and still make half your margin on that. So, in the case of the car, this thing only makes sense when you're selling at least a few units a month, and ideally dozens per month. Well, we can look at the numbers, after all. For Heidelberg, KBA, Komori, we can see how many similar machines need to be sold. These are sold in order of magnitude less. At the same time, the staff at Landa is much more expensive.
Yes, that's true.
The qualifications there, yes. Because the fact that they were all sold at a loss is beyond question. Well, that's normal.
Probably start, as Seryoja mentioned this point, I want to focus on it again. How much of a role did the development of inkjet printing play here? In recent years, it seems like inkjet is going to replace everything. Right? Or at least, there are prospects that it will surpass the existing technologies at some point in the future. So, as they say, with the ink and the printheads, well, the machines themselves are actually quite simple. But it's the inkjet printing technology itself that has made some kind of breakthrough in the last few years. What do you think? Could this also have undermined Landa in some way?
Let me start.
I'm
actually more of a specialist in inkjet printing than he is.
That's true. They'll break down our arguments later.
First of all, I have to say that the Landa machine is an inkjet printer.
Well, yes, of course.
So, practically, essentially, all these developments that have happened over the years in inkjet printing, well, excuse me, they use the same print heads.
Well, yes.
And he played, what kind of heads are there? What kind of heads will there be? Let it be.
Here we're talking specifically about simple inkjet printing, yes, traditionally.
Direct inkjet.
Direct inkjet printing, of course.
In this respect, indirect inkjet printing has some very clear advantages over direct, because we're printing on a well-predictable substrate on this belt, which you can do anything with. Moreover, this belt is also heated. So we solve the main problem. Where the hell do we get rid of all this water? Imagine that we're heating the paper we've printed on, and at the same time the ink is seeping somewhere, and we have to manage it in time, but without burning or warping the paper. So this very idea is quite ingenious. And indirect inkjet printing, or indirect laser printing like in indigo, has its own advantages and of course its own drawbacks. But in terms of the progress of inkjet printing as such, I think Landy actually comes out a bit more on the positive side than the negative. Nevertheless, I can say that all this talk about inkjet printing, supposedly killing off everyone as soon as tomorrow, is probably 3 times older than the idea that Landa will sell a lot of machines any day now. For as long as I can remember...
It's like when people say America's about to go bankrupt. Even Brezhnev used to say that.
That's a rumor that's been thoroughly tried and tested over time, again and again.
Yes. It's like Lavrov himself, I think, once happily quoted Rouget saying, Lavrov, who's been the foreign minister, I think, since the time of Jesus Christ. Since the time of Jesus Christ, we've constantly been told that inkjet printing is about to. But that's not the case. That's not the case. We can see that a lot is still being printed in the lower segment of screen printing, and that's precisely because it's indirect printing there. In other words, we can print on any paper, and we see that in certain specialized areas, like HP Indigo, for example, more is still being sold in labels than all inkjet combined, even now.
All right. Misha, now let's ask a real expert.
No, well, look, if we're talking about inkjet printing technologies, are they really its killer? Well, let's put it this way. Probably, let's say it's not the main one because, well, really it's a combination of factors, yes. The war in Israel against Palestine, against Iran, also naturally affected the financial results, including the fact that some of their developments didn't work out, partly because investors stopped funding. Why? Because they simply see, for example, how artificial intelligence is developing right now. And they say, why are we investing here? Let's invest over there instead. And most likely, the investments will pay off faster in that area because, well, it's all very simple. There's no sentimentality here at all. It's just pure unapologetic capitalism.
Class struggle.
So if we're talking about inkjet printing technologies, well, I don't know. For example, I see the following. Well, indeed, Benny Landa initially started working with the Kyocera printhead, and the 600 DPI quality it produced, he transmitted it through his, essentially, well, his line. Transfer, yes, of course, let's say, it turned out to be a transfer technology. Now he uses Samba printheads from Fujifilm with a resolution of 1200, which are very small, really tiny in size, and truly capable of delivering the highest quality. But many users say the following. That's what they've seen, including at exhibitions, of course. I understand, Mikhail. There are some samples there, but sometimes you take a sample, polish it, check everything is perfect, and then you give it to clients. But then there are the real samples. They say there are points that weren't there originally, and for some reason they get transferred. Another problem is that some things that should have been transferred for some reason weren't. The belt, for example, is supposed to be everlasting, but it turns out you actually have to replace it quite often, and so on. The inkjet printing technologies themselves have certain inherent limitations, which, for example, I notice right away, it's very obvious when people compare them. Look at offset inks. Roughly speaking, if you compare them, for example, to graphic inks, well, it's like a very thick kefir, so to speak. They even look perhaps even thicker, like some kind of low-fat sour cream. Yes, low-fat sour cream. And offset inks, well, I don't know, it's like you could practically cut them into bricks and stack them. The pigment concentration is incredible. What is missing in inkjet printing technologies today? Why? Because unfortunately, the viscosity that the printhead can handle is very limited. In fact, the viscosity is like water almost at the same level. As soon as it starts to increase, you need to use more pigment. Because what did Benny choose to say? That I can print on any material. Meaning whether it's thick paper or thin paper, I get the same result everywhere. Because with inkjet printing, the ink soaks into the material and becomes faded. You need more ink, but sometimes the absorbency of the material has certain limitations. So right now there's a new trend emerging, but we don't see it anywhere yet. Why? Because the first developments appeared literally less than a year ago, and first they need to come up with the ink, make it, and test it. printer manufacturers need to become interested in these printheads, start experimenting with them, and so on. But those, let's say certain, what are you talking about?
High viscosity inks.
High viscosity inks.
Super high viscosity if you compare them numerically to offset ink. How much?
No, those numbers aren't even comparable because,
Exactly. The numbers just aren't comparable.
well, roughly speaking, honey,
They're orders of magnitude different.
no doubt about it. But for inkjet printing, this is a tremendous leap forward. Inkjet printing can't use either offset or flexographic inks at this point. But even a jump, roughly speaking, from 3 or 10 centipoise to 100 is a very good viscosity.
With honey, that's approximately...
Yes, 10,000 centipoise is the viscosity of honey. That's the kind of print.
Comparable, I think, to offset inks.
Well, actually, I think offset inks are even thicker in this regard.
Well, comparable, yes. Not 1,000,000 and not 1,000?
No, of course, it's 10,000. And if we're talking about Kyocera inkjet printheads, Epson can use 3 to 4 centipoise. Water is 0. The viscosity of water is 0. Next, there are printheads used by Fujifilm, Konica Minolta, Toshiba Tech, and Seiko. They use 8 to 12, well, let's say around 10 centipoise. Now, XR says that they have a printhead that uses 100 centipoise. Yes, there is a German manufacturer which has now been acquired by XR specifically for the production of printheads, and they claim 1,000 centipoise, but so far the only commercial product is 500. This is already a significant breakthrough for the 3D prototyping industry because for them it's very important that naturally the models are free of air pockets inside and are of course as rigid as possible and so on. That's why with the technologies that exist now, a tremendous breakthrough happened when we achieved the physical resolution of 1200 with Dymatics. This is the nozzle size using Kyocera printheads, which are probably the industry standard now. In fact, almost all the printers currently in China that are used for digital book printing, digital label printing, and so on, all use Kyocera printheads. It's essentially the industry standard. They have already released a printhead with 1200 DPI.
Cardboard.
Yes.
This year, they released this printhead for ultraviolet in commercial use for water-based inks. They released a 1200 DPI version 3 years ago, if not 5.
That's right.
But what we're talking about now,
But it's more complex with water.
but right now we're still talking about water-based inks. Landa uses water-based printheads. So for Landa specifically, nothing has changed this year. There's no ultraviolet there.
If we talk about the overall development of inkjet printheads, they're moving in such a direction that, first of all, the physical resolution is 1200, and there's really nowhere higher to go. The next direction of development now is increasing viscosity, which will allow for the use of more pigment. What will this do for the print? It simply won't soak into the paper the way it does now.
The drying problem will be solved in a different way.
Well, naturally, first of all, you'll be spraying less ink directly onto it. It's one thing when the ink soaks in, you have to keep adding more and more drops on top so that even as it soaks in, the color stays bright enough to be a sellable print quality. So of course, it won't be like Landa claims 500 microns, well, 500 nanometers, which is 0.0005. 0.5 microns is the thickness of the ink layer that's transferred. Although it's very strange that, for example, in Russia and worldwide, something is considered nano only when it's less than 100 nanometers. But he says his is 0.5.
Well, they just rounded it, for heaven's sake.
If it's less than a micron, then it's nano.
So it's already nano, right?
No nanotechnology is considered to be 100 nanometers if it's below that.
Yeah. It's our boa constrictor. We do as we please and the world just goes along.
Yeah. But in parrots, it's much longer.
This thing here is related to water-based inks. It is primarily in demand, well, in packaging and labeling, in those areas where contact with food products is required.
Look, considering that water-based inks are now, roughly speaking, several times, let's put it this way, cheaper than ultraviolet inks for the same, not even per liter, but per square centimeter, they are in demand everywhere. Remember, like they say, what can you play with under supervision? So you see, with everything...
And UV inks, of course, don't cover more than...
They stick to more of the surface. They don't get absorbed.
I'm comparing, roughly speaking, not a liter of ink, which is much simpler. I'm comparing it like this. We printed this label, and printing this label with water-based inks would cost several times less than with ultraviolet inks. If you can actually do it,
If we can dry it, right?
yes. Because a label will most likely be printed on plastic, which not only doesn't absorb water, it actively repels it. Doesn't even get wet. The water will just bounce right off.
Yes.
So in order to print on it, you'll have to coat it with something. And coating it with something, also costs money. Secondly, thirdly, and so on. So now,
Does Landa's technology allow you to get around this problem? I mean, can you just slap a film onto
a new silk-like plastic?
Maybe that's Landa's niche, after all?
For reasons that are still unknown to me, although I can guess it's probably because of potential competition with Hewlett-Packard. Well, I won't make any definite claims about intrigue. I have a personal assumption that this is what's preventing him from doing it, because he apparently has some risks with Hewlett-Packard, probably legal ones. Since I don't know the details, I haven't had any insider information. So in general, that's just my personal impression. But what happens, roughly speaking, if we print directly with inkjet on polyethylene? A vivid example, polyethylene is non-wettable, so the droplet just beads up and rolls off. What happens with Landa? We print on the blanket, and what we get is a heated pie. We basically press it onto the polyethylene, and it more or less sticks there normally. Actually, the same thing happens with indigo. It prints just fine on polyethylene, but the Konica Minolta AC230, on the contrary, cannot print on polyethylene. Why is that? Because its toner melts at a temperature where the polyethylene would already be ruined.
So basically, it melts together with the polyethylene.
It melts either earlier or later than the polyethylene.
So you end up with, a new ingot at the output. A substrate.
You end up with an ingot right out of the machine.
Yeah. Everything just stacks up in a column.
It's just an oven in there.
All right. So then, again, continuing Mikhail's idea and referring to his assumption, let me ask, did HP Indigo and the deal supposedly kill Landa? In other words, did they prevent it from developing?
No, they didn't kill it. That would be like saying, for example, that a girl grew up beautiful and smart, but not smart enough, because it turned out there were better brides around. And those brides who were more successful got married. Did they kill her? Maybe in some sense, but not really. They didn't kill her.
The risk from lawsuits by other brides didn't let her reach her potential.
They themselves, by their very existence, made it so that Landa took steps that perhaps seemed like the right ones. But among other things, this didn't allow for development.
He sold HP and lost the opportunity to develop the next technology. Opportunity behind risk?
Not quite. He actually started coming up with the technology after he sold HP.
Well, of course, yes. So basically, he limited himself, essentially. He didn't know what would happen in the future. He was like, oh, okay, what can you do? You can't sell the same thing twice. What an unfortunate sale, right? Turns out it was 800, after all, million.
In fact, if you look back, when he was moving in that direction, and even when he presented the first printer prototype at the trade show and so on, there really didn't seem to be any major threats to him.
Nothing foreshadowed it, right?
Well, yes. Timing is everything, because back then, especially considering all those vivid stories about how the production cost would be 5% lower than offset printing, like at certain print runs, which, of course, everyone was waiting for. No one knew exactly how that would actually work out, of course.
It's magic.
Yeah. When he showed that you could print on anything and so on, of course, that inspired a lot of people because, well, the success of HP Indigo naturally gave people confidence that if this person invented that technology.
There's one thing if some random guy says it, and another thing entirely if it's a guy who's already made $1 billion off of it. If you're so smart, why haven't you sold your technology for $1 billion yet? Well, success in the past doesn't guarantee success in the future. We know that perfectly well. You can't step into the same river twice.
Yes. And I even remember that presentation back in 2012 when he showed that a cookie and digital printing are like the crumbs that fall off the cookie. They only pick up those crumbs, but I want the whole cookie, and you can get that cookie. All done digitally, all in the presentation.
Exactly. But he sold, damn it, sorry, that needs to be cut out. He sold, just the crumbs. That's it.
He was aiming for a ruble, right?
Yeah, he was aiming for the cookie, but sold the crumbs.
So today, print shops are just standing there waiting for the cookie to drop and for some crumbs to fall off. And they're like, where is it? What do you mean? So what are we paying for?
No, actually, a lot of people are also asking the following question. Okay, if Landa is such a breakthrough technology that is fundamentally different from everything else, if it's a technology that delivers a cost price that neither offset nor any other printing technology can come close to, then here's the question. Why is it that wherever Landa is installed, the others aren't shutting down? It's just like, for example, the very simple story with Walmart, as they say. What does Walmart do? They come in and set prices below cost. A year later, when all the small private businesses have closed down, they set the price back to normal and start operating. Everywhere Landa is installed, people haven't noticed anything, no changes in market conditions. No one's starting to close down or taking away orders that weren't there before.
So continuing with this idea, does that mean you could have just installed an HP Indigo in any print shop instead of a Landa and not worried about it?
Well, in this particular case, I've looked into it very closely and studied it thoroughly. Of course, I studied it as a business development director. I need to understand this.
The risks or the opportunities, right?
Is it worth doing something like this? Take Bertelsmann, for example, a German company that prints a tremendous amount of packaging forms. They are a major client of HP Indigo. And naturally, they print these digital crumbs on digital presses. These are presses up to the second format. They bought a Landa press. They even printed on it. And I was just explaining that everything is fine. I studied everything there is. From Hewlett-Packard's internal data, I know the cost price that was basically given to them.
A car to Landa, right?
Yes. I mean, obviously there's an NDA, but I found out something here and there. For me, all of this, I compared it, but after that, they bought 2 more HP Indigo presses. Exactly.
So HP Indigo, Landa, and then 2 more HP Indigos, right?
Yes. I think that didn't stop them from going after another contract for a Landa as well. So it's not a case where they bought a Landa and then said...
They were disappointed.
They were ready to buy more, but at the same time, they also bought an Indigo. So these 2 presses are so similar that they can coexist within the same company.
But without cannibalizing each other.
Without one eating up the other. So it wasn't a case of either this or that. They are similar. So it's another digital machine. By the way, thank you, Sergey, for this. I hadn't seen this presentation. It's just another way to break off a piece of the cookie. It's not a way to eat the whole cookie.
Not even to break off a piece, but just to sweep a few crumbs from one to the other.
Just take a crumb from each other.
Yes, a battle for crumbs.
There you go, by the way. That's it. That's the title of the video.
That's the title of the video.
Battle for crumbs!
And who won?
No, I know who lost.
Little Bendy.
No. I know. I mean, of course, I understand that.
By the way, do you know how to say okroshka in English?
No.
Oh, baby. Oh, baby.
Very good. By the way, that was a good thought too.
All right. Here's a question. What will happen when Landa disappears? How will that affect...
Actually, first of all, it won't disappear.
No. How will it affect the market if Landa shuts down? So let's suppose this is a hypothetical situation. No one will buy it.
2 scenarios. Someone buys or no one buys.
Well, let's consider that. So Landa would remain as it is, but with a new owner...
Yes.
And Landa isn't needed by anyone and just shuts down. Which scenarios are more likely?
Well, I think both scenarios are unlikely.
Is a third possible?
A third one is more likely.
And what is it?
That is, the company will go bankrupt.
Uh-huh.
To write directly, he should get a response so that basically those who have already lost money, they've lost money, recorded their losses, and then accordingly
moved on, taps flowing.
To invest in artificial intelligence.
And a real topic.
Uh-huh. So this is a question about tangible assets. I think that, for example, Hewlett-Packard could very well make use of a factory right next to them, just across the wall, for a reasonable price. And they could even produce Indigo there.
By the way, I remember, I also took part in Drupa in 2008. I remember the financial director of HP came to our booth I was working at Office on at the time. I asked him back then, because they had a lot of wide format printers. I don't remember his name.
I actually know all of them.
Really? But honestly, I just don't remember him. I think I even still have his business card somewhere. I asked him, and at that time, they were buying up Israeli wide format printer companies in bulk. Skytex, Nu, macro printers, and so on. I said, why did you buy them? He replied, if the price is good, why not? That was the key point. That said, if the price is good, then why not?
This is a typical American perspective that dominates now. It's not that visionary approach characteristic of Landa or Bardash. For them, it's really about the money. We do business, they care about money, not about magic or dreams. And honestly, that's a good thing, because it's better to get money than to hustle for nothing.
In the medium term,
with money, somehow...
Yeah, somehow it'll work out.
I'll just say it's a circus.
All right.
Exactly. That's regarding material assets. So all of that But then these patents, surely this indirect inkjet printing, which seems pretty obvious, is somehow protected by those very patents. And it seems to me that technologically applying these principles in other solutions could potentially be fruitful without that billion-dollar bag.
Like, for example, I don't know, corrugated printing?
I think it might be interesting to Hewlett-Packard as well.
Yeah.
Potentially because they have a very similar machine, the V12. They even have a belt there already. So with the belt, people have already solved the problem so that the belt works properly. Why hasn't Hewlett-Packard made this V12 for flexible packaging yet? It's clearly in demand. It could be Komori. Why? The reason for this is because Komori, as you may already be aware, A, is clearly and demonstrably interested in the field of digital printing technology, and B, they were in fact the primary and original developer of the mechanical part for all of this equipment, all of these advanced systems. And we shouldn't forget that there's this not so well-known country called China, where there's a lot of money, and they can just, something pops up, and they buy it. They're specifically interested in breakthrough technologies that no one else has. When people talk about those 15 or 14 days that we're given, those precious days we look forward to, each and every year,
Everyone starts looking at their watches when there's a countdown, right? But why is that?
the thing is, neither the Japanese people nor the Chinese people are really the kind of individuals who are actually typically used to making such quick and sudden decisions.
I'm interested in the hacker topic too. It also seemed like a promising technology that didn't find any interest on the market. So even the Chinese aren't picking up on it.
No, well, I don't know. About the Heike, the first time I saw it was back then. I thought it looked nice and I liked it. But after I wrote an internal memo, I said that we shouldn't authorize it because there wouldn't be any money in it.
Aha, so from the very beginning.
So as for the prospects of this particular type of product, there won't be any money. The technology is beautiful, but there's no money in it.
That's just like with Lando.
And I said the same thing about Lando with Sohm. I can show you. Thank you so much that we didn't get involved in that.
For many reasons.
I can tell you why.
Why?
Because when we're talking about digital printing, every print has a different image. I understand why you need a lot of different ones. When we talk about digital die cutting in cardboard, like with Hikon, you need a different box shape or a different box size. Guys, how many types of these boxes actually exist? And really, if you already have 50 different kinds, isn't one of them good enough for you? That's in corrugated packaging, where, 3 boxes is too many, but 2 is too few, and we end up wasting space. In that case, it might actually matter. But for a little box like this, or one for tea, for example,
It doesn't matter, right? Okay.
just use the same cliches. That's why Hikon was solving a problem that was made up.
It doesn't exist. They created the problem themselves and then solved it themselves.
Yes.
But the market didn't appreciate it.
No, that's normal. Steve Jobs, for example, invented a problem that he solved with the iPhone. And it turned out that it was actually part of reality,
Yes?
inventing a problem that's top class. But, sorry, they didn't invent the kind of problem Steve Jobs did.
If it weren't for Steve Jobs, just hype, the whole world would still be using those machines. All right, are there any other options? So, okay, maybe someone unknown will buy it, they'll go bankrupt, and then what?
Well, what's the likelihood that someone will actually go ahead and buy the whole thing?
It's not zero.
It's just that there's really way too much money in the red there.
Oh, so you have to take on the debts too?
Basically, you'd have to pay, roughly speaking, $1.5 billion. Or at least $500 million. Well, at least, yes. Then it said that you need another 300 million just to keep going.
And wait 5 years.
Yeah. No. Well, okay, you also need to... it's one thing when there was a team, but now the whole team has sorted things out, run off here, left for other things. That will also take extra time, right? So it turns out you have an unfinished, unsuccessful product. Okay, guaranteed to be unsuccessful for 12 years. So you need to...
With the prospect of possibly becoming successful in the next 5 years, right?
Yeah, so you end up with, some kind of naturally risk, right? You invest, roughly speaking, you pay off debts like $500 million. You need to invest additionally to bring this technology to a certain logical conclusion. But the most important thing is to sell. Let's start with the fact that I, of course, also thought, okay, fine. And there's a long list of those who could buy it. There's Fuji, of course, and Canon and so on. They even mentioned Xerox.
and Koningbauer as well. And there really is a problem there. All the investments in development and so on for Koenig, Bauer amount to 500 million, 50 million per year. In fact, they're taking a 10-year development budget, and that's just to cover debts. But it seems to me that's hardly such a weak scenario. Many people are saying that there really will be a debt write-off. Right now, they do have some assets, right? They take those, sell them off. The part that's left is given back to them. And then they simply call the company Landa Digital Printing 2. Benny comes back there again with his patents, of which there are about 800. And as I understand it, Mikhail said that even the technology of laser printing in general, Benny, who knows what year it was patented, and from every conveyor,
some little piece from that very same...
From the 70s, basically, somewhere around there.
Yeah, maybe by now his patents have already expired, but no, Sergey. This scenario where, roughly speaking, a company is created for bad debts and then bankrupted, and the remaining company continues to carry the banner that slipped from weakened hands?
that won't be enough for this. They don't believe you.
I don't believe it. Because once you've lied, who would ever believe you again? This banner shouldn't just be passed on to a weak hand, like, sort of, but what's the advantage? If that hand is, I don't know, in the Comoros or in Pakuda, or if it's a multi-billion T investment, then that's understandable.
Yes. Limitless financial resources, investments, and everything else.
And as we know, the Chinese can afford to, blow a few billion just like that. And one of these mistakes of vivid example is Lexum. How much did they buy it for, and how much did they sell it for? Guys, where's the scandal?
They ended up with losses.
Where's the scandal?
Nothing.
Yeah, it's no big deal. They made $1 trillion somewhere else at the same time because, well, you can't have a profit everywhere. So there was a loss here. Who cares? Let Xerox deal with it. He needs to...
So I see investments the way Seryoja and Misha also mentioned, either investing in a working technology or in an established sales channel. In other words, you already have someone to sell to. A third is probably the team, right? That is the people who can actually create it. But we know Benny, right? He's the face of Alland. Then there are those 500 unknown engineers who are doing their best to keep things going. This groundwork that's been laid is interesting. Will it somehow turn into something else? I mean, will people leave and start building their own like mini Landas?
Well, actually, if we're talking about Israel, it's a startup, 4 startups that then, yes, either grow or, roughly speaking, go bankrupt. So even if they're in this field in Israel, I'm sure they'll be able to find some projects, and then we'll hear that someone used to be at Landa, and now they're leading a startup that has grown, maybe even gone public, for example, and so on. That's probably why, as I understand it well. I don't know, Mikhail, do you think so or not? Because it seems to me he created Landa, Benny created Landa with the intention to sell it from the very beginning. The moment he founded the company, his only goal was to sell it. I think he just missed the right moment when he should have done it. I don't know, maybe he should have done it in 2013, maybe in 2018 or in 2020. Well, who knows exactly when? Because back then the market still believed that this was the technology that would change everything. And now it turns out that his only goal is to save face and somehow present himself as successful in this situation.
Oh, well, to be honest, I both agree and disagree. Regarding the fact that, of course, he should have sold all of this.
About 10 years ago, right?
When the hype was at its absolute peak. Back in those days, as everyone remembers, not now, when it's all...
There's still hype, but not in that sense. It's tough in this kind of situation.
I can even, just for fun, give you a decent joke.
I want to, but I can't.
Exactly. As for the fact that he started doing all this, should I tell the joke after all? As you know, experienced law enforcement officers say that the most important thing in an investigation is not to outsmart yourself.
That's a classic.
It's exactly the same in marketing. The most important thing when you're creating this whole new reality is not to believe in it yourself too much. When you get too caught up in your own narrative, you risk losing perspective and making critical errors. Landa's mistake was that he believed in it too much, allowing his own constructed reality to cloud his judgment and ultimately lead him astray.
And he stuck with it to the end.
That is...
He still believes, yes, I think...
He still believes. He was genuinely convinced. You can see it from his financials. It wasn't an attempt to sell, it was an attempt, in Maslow's pyramid, he already had everything else. He'd already sold a company for $1 billion. That wasn't his goal. He had another hire goal to control 2% of Israel's economy.
Recognition, yes, by any means.
That is, to be not only great, which he already was, but he wanted to be the greatest. And notice, in the first years, he refused to accept investments. He was pouring in his own money, and we're talking hundreds of millions. Now we see that there were only 1.3 million in investments, but 500 million in debt. Guys, where else?
Where did the money come from? Did he just take it out of a drawer?
This money, it came out of the drawer.
Yes.
And that's the very same drawer in particular where his personal money was. In other words, he believed in his own magic a little too much. If this had been purely a business project, he would have sold it in 2015 and would have been a serial entrepreneur twice over. But he wanted to, well, make Israel great again. Subtitles by Dmitry Startsev.
But it didn't work out.
As for, well, what about everything else? What will happen to all of this? Well, we've already talked about that. Now I've already forgotten what else there was.
The question was, yes, what's next for us? That is, how will this affect the market as a whole, right?
What's going to happen next? These patents could end up in the hands of those who will use them immediately, or in the hands of those who will just shelve them. That's really the only question that should concern all of us. Because whoever loses hundreds of millions back and forth, that's not us, not any of us. They did it themselves, after all. The term joint venture, which in Russian is совместное предприятие, in English actually means shared risk. And if you translate it literally, it means a joint adventure.
I'll split it lines.
Yes, that's their problem. If these patents work, we might actually get solutions that are more effective. Yes, in any case, there's nothing to worry about.
Let's agree on that.
Offset will know what threatens offset. Really, the main thing that honestly threatens offset is the internet.
Yes, that there will be nothing.
Encrypted channels. People, I used to always say that people might stop reading and writing, but they can't stop eating and drinking. But unfortunately, though, even now, people aren't actually reading what's printed by offset. In fact, yes, I'm trying to remember, when was the last time I bought, a newspaper? And it definitely wasn't 2 years ago. This has happened before.
Long ago.
And there was a time when I used to subscribe to all those things. They were all printed by offset. During this interview, I've already asked this artificial intelligence 3 questions. Right here, right now.
And you didn't run to the encyclopedia shelf?
It's even faster than, actually, well, Googling it.
Yes. Now you just have to say search. Yes. That's how it is.
The search engine gives you answers right away. But the thing is, you always have to double check. Sometimes it lies, the bastard.
That does happen.
But accordingly, if this gets implemented, then in the end, we'll get more effective and efficient digital printing machines.
So this will benefit the industry?
It will ultimately be beneficial. If it ends up buried for some reason or another, well, then
It won't be beneficial.
that means nothing will change. And when eventually all of this ends up in the hands of those who are ready to sell, maybe by then it will already be irrelevant. As an example, I can mention the same author who had a completely unique idea called, I don't even remember what he called it. I think it was metallic nanography, the one that was bought by that. Actually, she didn't buy it at all. She got it in exchange for her investments. Altona, the German company, they poured money into it. And then they said, listen, this broth, we're boiling eggs, broth. I was like, this? And she says, well, here it is. There's this technology. What an interesting technology. Let's do it. What's the idea behind it? When we apply foil to anything, first apply this foil at the factory onto a polyester film.
Then they spray on the adhesive layer.
It's literally just a micron thick, that stuff. And then we transfer it. This is a unique technological process where, by mass, the waste makes up more than 99%.
Whoa.
Not only is that inefficient, but, it's also very environmentally dirty. No matter what anyone says, this foil is unique. So what did Van Dyke do? He said, let's cut the flakes and we'll apply these flakes instead. And we won't have any of that carrier material. He even managed to create a working prototype. And about 10 years ago, he either gave or sold it. I don't even know to those same Germans. I've even seen those prints myself. There are only about as many beta installations as you can count on one hand.
Uh-huh.
But again, talking with, I won't mention any names, but the people who got the worldwide exclusive say, listen, all of this would have sold if, roughly speaking, it had cost at least something comparable to that foil.
But it doesn't.
Well, apparently it's much more expensive.
But
How is that?
and greed leads to poverty. So now everyone has already forgotten about it. I mean, all of it, the calligraph, everything.
Turns out the foil isn't so dirty after all. It's fine. For that kind of money, it's acceptable.
No big deal. We have other, even more contaminated ones.
Let's count not in percentages, but in kilograms.
And that's fine, right?
Yes. And besides, we know how to recycle it.
So, in other words, the problem was solved in a completely different way.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Well, if we put it briefly, for example, okay, when it comes to newspapers, magazines, and so on, I've also seen that many people have wondered what will happen to offset printing in the long run in this regard. If we don't look at the long-term perspective, but focus on the current situation, we have things like, for example, packaging printing, which is sold in stores, large chain stores, for instance, in the marketplaces. And what do we see now? That printing for selling certain products on marketplaces is simply no longer necessary. And marketplaces are growing by about 20 to 30% every year. Not because people are consuming more, but simply because they're buying less in small shops, less in chain stores, less at markets. They're buying on marketplaces instead. That's how it is in this regard. So, as unfortunate as it may sound, of course, I can even see it myself when people are riding the subway and so on, even in their cars, everyone is on their phones, and print is becoming less and less relevant. You've probably noticed this too. Maybe you or Mikhail have seen it. A client comes in, you print out a beautiful booklet or brochure for them, hand it over, and they say, man, it's heavy. Can you just send it to me electronically? Or they ask you to send it before they leave.
They say, I'm not going to take it, right?
Yeah, it's heavy and everything else in that regard. And we've already discussed with you what's the outlook for printed magazines as such in this regard. No, but really, we talked about this with Galina.
No, we didn't discuss it.
A little link.
Cut it out. Laughter.
Editing, as they say. So, you can either fight it or you can get ahead of it in this regard. I see one thing when it comes to inkjet printing. It's not just standing still and waiting for Benny Landa or someone else to develop something in this area. It's moving into new niches for itself. For example, that includes printing lithium batteries or printing automotive paint. So now, well, the technology has advanced so much that you no longer need to apply powder coatings or overtypes and then bake the whole thing, where you end up using an excessive amount of paint. Instead, it can be applied using inkjet methods, and it will be possible to add inscriptions to create two-color designs, because it turns out that this is actually a significant problem in the world. You can't spray two borders precisely, for example, using any kind of spray gun so that you get a clear line, say a red and a white one, for instance. But with inkjet printing, all of this becomes possible. It's unclear whether it will take off in the mass market, but the first examples as such already exist. That's it. Nevertheless, I'm convinced that inkjet printing is in general the only viable digital printing method, because we understand well probably that HP Indigo's liquid toner has reached its peak, and Zcon probably hit its maximum about 15 years ago. I mean, the print resolution they achieve is fantastic, but Zcon probably loses to HP Indigo by a factor of 10B many times over. That's it. Despite the fact that they, in every respect in this regard, yes. So it's like there are two technologies, maybe at some point in time they still competed with each other, but now, to put it bluntly, it's like a small dog and an elephant. That's how it all looks in this regard.
Well, I think this is primarily due to the tremendous intellectual resources of the people who are responsible for running Zcon. But the most striking example was when they bought Getrion, the number one manufacturer in this.
They took it from FES. Inkjet? Yes.
Yes, again, a good, successful Jewish startup founder,
If I'm not mistaken.
And so the first thing they did with the number one in the field of inkjet label printing was to reduce it to 0. The second thing they did was create their own, let's say rather infamous, and to be completely honest, not very well received monstrosity of a creation, something that really didn't go over well.
For printing the same thing, right?
Yes. And the third thing they did was make a deal with some Asian company, and now they sell it as an OEM product. So this is clearly a sign of great managerial talent. With that kind of money and those kinds of resources, to perform so poorly.
I just remember, if I'm not mistaken, Label Expo in either 2010 or whenever it was, when there was a technology war, there were 3, right? Inkjet printing, liquid toner, and dry toner. Liquid toner is indigo, Jetrion is inkjet printing, and Zcon is dry toner. So they set up all three machines at one booth, and they were all printing, though, to be fair, with different layouts.
Yes, different layouts, but supposedly on the same type of material. So who would win in that regard? I mean, you see, back then, even 15 years ago, they were still saying, like, we're equals. But now, well, what can you say HP with its portfolio and installations, and then everyone else? The Getrion project, you could say, was handed over to Zcon, and they quickly shut it down. Methodical elimination.
Finished it off, and that's it. It's all his fault. Let's beat him up, as they say. That's it. And Zcon, naturally, is already losing out a lot in this regard. That's why I say, well, inkjet printing technologies will keep developing, they'll keep moving forward, while offset has probably already reached its peak. But in terms of print quality and the setup speed, which in the latest machines is practically zero, well, that's probably gradually making a difference.
No, but excuse me, if we're used to saying that inkjet printing has suddenly, so to speak, surged. But what about offset, which has also advanced? And for me, it's not about the fact that they're now printing not 10,000 but 20,000 sheets. What matters to me is this very thing, the time it takes for changeover, for setup. I remember that people who managed to do more than 10 setups per shift seemed almost like gods to us.
Yes.
But now, in fact, a modern machine sets up so efficiently offset. I mean, that, all else being equal, there's simply no room left for digital to wedge in.
Yes. That's exactly how it is. It's a dead end.
So, the fact that offset has stopped developing might just mean that the development, like, setup time being less than 0.0,
there's nowhere further to go. No, what I mean is that the printing technology itself has kind of reached a plateau. Everything now is built around it. All the add-ons are being developed.
but actually, it's still continuing to grow even faster.
Awesome.
Offset, excuse me, prints on such things that sometimes it's even scary. They print on tin with offset.
They've always printed on it.
Well, they print a lot.
Yes, a lot, for many years.
Yes. In inkjet printing, there is one fundamental thing, which, by the way, is partly a problem that is partially solved by the same indirect printing method, and that's that the droplets don't actually fly exactly where you want them to. They fly somewhere else.
Into a cloud.
Yes. And if we do this, we can't make this distance zero.
Yes.
Accordingly, that's what they all do. When people tell me, when I'm told that 1200 dpi is basically the resolution beyond which you don't need to go, I remember those years when we worked with CTP, square dots, everything was simple. Let's take a chessboard. Black, white, black, white. Now, if I output a chessboard like this on CTP with a resolution of 2400, that's possible on the best CTPs. If I print this, it's very difficult to print it with offset because 1200 black, white, 1200 periods on this, it will print very well with offset on this kind of good, high quality paper. If I try to output such a field with inkjet printing, I don't think I could even manage 300 dpi.
No, with today's technology, it's possible. You can't see anything with the naked eye anymore. You can only read the text under a microscope.
I'm not talking about the technology you're referring to. I'm talking about a chessboard pattern. That's a very inconvenient subject for inkjet printing, which actually shows exactly where the droplet lands. But she's flying in the wrong direction. What does 1200 dpi mean from the perspective of inkjet printing, after all? That's several times 300. So I take the printhead in. Actual Samba printhead has a single row, I think, of 300 nozzles per inch.
Yeah, I'm talking about Sambo.
Then we arrange several rows of them, and the conclusion is made that if we set up not just one at 300, but two at 300, that makes 600. And if we set up 4 of them, then it will be 1200. And if we set up 16, then we'll probably get some unbelievable thousands. What's more, there are these clever marketers who claim the resolution is 4800.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean at all that a printer advertises 4800 will actually print, even a 600 gridding chessboard.
I get it, yes. No, well, there are two things here. First, when we actually have new printheads, including those from Kyocera and Samba, they have this nuance where their arrangement is strictly structured, and it's not just a strip, but rather it's set at a certain width. And then the big question becomes, how does the electronics work? In such a way that it manages to create the right delay so that your line remains a line. And it's actually very simple. Instead of a checkerboard pattern, you just make stripes vertical, horizontal, diagonal, and print them. And we can immediately see if your stripe comes out looking like a staircase. In fact, For many machines nowadays, they say this is the toughest print test when the print head has very high resolution. The electronics have to work so that your stripe stays a stripe and not, roughly speaking, like something out of Minecraft. In this regard, when you can't have anything round there, for example, sure, you can have something straight. But again, it will look as if it's made up of pixels as such. So the second problem really does exist, and it's related to the fact that nowadays, many printheads, in order to provide physical resolution, require the droplets to match the physical resolution. They have to be small. When we print at speeds, okay, at 5 meters per second, you can achieve this not with a single printhead, but with many printheads lined up in a row, so that, roughly speaking, the first prints, then the second, first, second, and so on. This is done so that you fill in this physical resolution. The problem is the airflow, which blows away these tiny droplets. The only solution that might work, Kodak, has a solution where they actually don't use piezo inkjet technology at all, but rather continuous inkjet droplets. But this is, of course, so-called drop on demand, where the droplet travels at an incredibly high speed, so the airflow doesn't affect it at all. It won't randomly place dots. They will hit the target precisely. Everything Mikhail is saying is valid, and now printheads are being developed where the droplet ejection speed is not 6 meters per second, but 9. Again, I'll say, not at all speeds, but this helps solve the problem, including the issue of dust. So, the first problem in printing is to have straight lines, and the second is to avoid dust. You want the droplet to land exactly where it should, not be blown away.
So, as not to delve into the technologies we've just touched on, let's sum up what we've discussed about Landa, what we've learned about what's happening there now, and of course, that very story which is still unfolding and will continue for a couple more days. Let's see what happens. Yes, we're waiting for Thursday to happens, and
The 15 days will be over.
yes, and we'll see what happens next. Thank you to everyone who joined us, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye, everyone.